Joining us on episode number 98 of the Primetime Rundown is our good friend, managing editor of the Niners Wire of the USA Today SMG Group, and midday producer for 95.7 FM, The Game out in San Francisco, Kyle Madson. Kyle, it's good to have you back on, sir, and it's been a long 7 months without you on the program.
Yeah. No, I was hoping you guys would hit me up. I like coming on this show.
Thank you. Love having you.
And what a day for it.
Well, you segue right in perfectly, because we had to ask you back in January about whether or not Jimmy G was going to be on the roster come the 2022 season. Let's take a peek at your response from January. If Jimmy G keeps this going here, Kyle, there's a possibility that Jimmy G might be here to stay. Is that something that you're hearing on your side of the country, or is it going to be Trey Lance in 2022?
No, he's gone. Jimmy's gone. So, all right. So here's the deal.
All right, we got to stop that. There we go.
That's fine.
Let's hear it.
It's funny. I've been talking to some friends about this. I was like, I don't know if I've ever been more wrong about a thing. No, it's just because I didn't there was Jimmy Garoppolo taking less money to stay with the team that drafted his replacement last year, just didn't make sense. That didn't seem like, and the Niners keeping him at $24.2 million didn't make sense. And him restructuring his contract to take way less and stay as a backup didn't make sense. And so it's just there's no path that makes sense where he stays. So he restructured his deal. He's going to make $6.5 million guaranteed this year, which is a reasonable amount for a backup and what will probably be the best backup quarterback in the league. And now the question is, what does this mean? Trey Lance is a starter. Kyle Shanahan has said this is Trey's team, but what does that look like if the Niners are 0-4 or 2-5 and playing for their playoff lives? Are they going to stick with the developmental quarterback, or are they going to go with the guy that they know can get them there? It raises a lot of questions, but from a football perspective, just in a vacuum, if you remove the human element of this is the right move. Jimmy Garoppolo is probably a top, 16, 17, 18 quarterback, and that just kind of in that range. And he's their QB2. And so they insulate themselves from Lance getting hurt, which in his first start last year, he got hurt. He sprained his knee. And then if Lance just isn't good, if he just doesn't develop or he doesn't play well, they have a player that they can go to who has gotten them to the NFC Championship game in the Super Bowl. So from a football perspective, it makes sense, and financially it makes sense. I just did not foresee any scenario where this is how this went down.
When I saw this, and now just to let everyone know what time this all occurred, 5:24 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, Ian Rappaport reports Jimmy Garoppolo and the San Francisco 49ers agree to a new contract that makes him the highest paid backup in the National Football League. He'll be behind Trey Lance. It's a one-year restructure, $6.5 million in base salary that is fully guaranteed, $500,000 in roster bonuses, and then there's a playtime bonus, Kyle, that can bump it up to $9 million with a maximum of $16 million.
Yeah.
That is something absolutely crazy. Now, the first question I have to ask you here is that, I know that this is a completely different scenario as opposed to, and again, I'm an Eagles fan. I can look at Carson Wentz and Nick Foles because, even though that, Jimmy G did lead them to the NFC Championship, to the Super Bowl. Nick Foles also did win the Eagles the Super Bowl back in Super Bowl 52 or 2017 when Carson Wentz went down with the torn ACL. If that does happen, let's just say, for instance, where you brought up the scenario of a 2-5 or an 0-4 or I don't know if they're potentially 0-6. Well, it would never get to 0-6 because they would have to go to Jimmy G. What do you think the thoughts are, or the mental state there for Trey Lance would be when, you see someone across the country in Carson Wentz, his career is pretty much on the downward turn. And I know that Trey Lance is just beginning his career, but could we see something along those lines really early in his career?
Maybe. I don't think the Niners would have done this if they didn't think that Lance had the mental fortitude to deal with Jimmy Garoppolo being in the building.
Yeah.
And that's a big aspect of this, is if they Shanahan liked Lance because of what he's made of personally and mentally. And so that is something I don't think would be as significant of a problem. But to your point, Shanahan's talked about how Lance needs to play. And the way you get better is through playing. And Lance needs to stack reps and this and that. So at what point do they sacrifice that for winning this year? Because they're loaded. The Niners are stacked. They have top 3 guys at 4 or 5 positions.
Mm-hmm.
And they're a team that is paying this kind of money. They're up near the top of the salary cap because they expect to win.
Right.
And they expect to go to the playoffs and make playoff runs. So at what point do they sacrifice that development for Lance to go try and win this year? And then you can be as mentally tough as you want to be, but if a team takes a look at you through 5 games and says, oof, this isn't working, we'll go to this guy and try you again next year, that's going to be tough. That would be really, really tough. And I'm not writing anything off in this scenario now, but I think the Carson Wentz comp is worthwhile because of what it could mean developmentally for Lance if he just winds up playing half this year. So going into 23, he has 25 starts under his belt or whatever it would be over 4 seasons. That just doesn't. And going back to college, that you can't get better that way.
Yeah.
And that's where the Niners, I think, could have a problem.
Definitely something to keep an eye out for. Mike Szabo, take it away.
Yeah. Hey, Kyle, just moving off of the Jimmy G stuff and on a little bit more on the rest of the offensive end. We've heard Deebo Samuel dealing with a little bit of a knee injury in the past week, of course. What does that mean really in terms of how Kyle Shanahan wants to use him, if there's any concern for the season or concern about him getting hurt? Saw him how creatively he was used last year. Does this sort of hamper those plans?
No, I don't think so. At least not right now. It sounds like it's just a bruise in the knee that will heal up by week 1, and they're gonna use Deebo how they're gonna use him. The issue that comes up now is Lance and Samuel did not get a ton of time together in the offseason. And that was a big storyline in camp and in the preseason, although they only played a series or 2 together in the preseason, but they just haven't gotten a lot of reps and a lot of time to build that rapport. And so you'd hear out of camp 1, 2, 3 plays a game or 3 plays per practice where it's mix up on a route here or mix up on a route there between Lance and Samuel. And now this is another week of practice that they're not getting in, and maybe another 2 weeks of practice that they're not getting in. And that's where the problem comes up more than I think Samuel's usage, because Shanahan's just kind of made it clear they're going to do what they think is best to win, whether that means running Samuel or using him in the passing game or whatever it is.
Yeah, so I mean, going further along, on the running back side of things, they're probably going to use Samuel as a runner. There's a lot of ups and downs, of course. Elijah Mitchell, Jeff Wilson, what are they going to do there? And where's the state of the offense and how they really play around Lance as well? Do they wind up tailor a lot of running for him as they question a little bit of his accuracy and throwing ability? Is there going to be a lot of running in this offense this year?
Yeah, I think it's going to be super run heavy. I don't know how much Lance will use his legs, just because he was such a physical runner in college that it doesn't work in the NFL. The first time he tried to run through a guy was at the goal line against the Cardinals and he got stuffed. And then he tried it twice against the Texans in his second start, and it didn't work out. So I think they're going to use that, especially on like boot actions and maybe on some zone read stuff or read option stuff, just to try and catch a linebacker or defensive end napping where Lance can just kind of run around him. But I do think they're going to do a lot of exotic stuff in the run game. I think Elijah Mitchell will be their RB1, and I think he was at like 19 carries a game last year. I think they might want to go fewer than that just because he dealt with so many injuries. And I think they're going to run it a lot. I think there's going to be a ton of volume in the run game there. So Peter King just wrote that Trey Sermon is in line to be the RB2. I think it's Jeff Wilson Jr. It's just based on how they've looked. Jeff Wilson's healthy. He was the starter last year when Mitchell was out once he got back from his knee injury. But he just looks really good, really explosive. And he runs hard. Like that's the hallmark for Jeff Wilson. And then after that, I have no idea. Like it could be Trey Sermon. I personally think Trey Sermon's going to get cut, but it's just kind of looking more and more like that's not going to happen. So maybe they saw something with Sermon in practice that I didn't, and they really like him. Jermichael Hasty was their third down back last year. I think if he's on the team, that's going to be his primary role. And then Tyrion Davis-Price, they drafted from LSU. He didn't have as prominent of a role right away as I thought he might. So I think he might be like a short yardage type of back, at least early on. But yeah, as far as their run game, I think it's going to be very run heavy. And I think it's going to be a lot of Elijah Mitchell, definitely some Deebo Samuel sprinkled in. And then whoever the RB2 is, whether it's Wilson or Sermon or TDP, I think that player will get a lot of touches as well, just because I think the volume is going to be there.
And also, obviously, Elijah Mitchell making his way back looks like he's going to be able to play in week one following some injury, which is a nice thing. Kyle, switching over to the defensive side, we obviously got a chance to see, not in a good way, but Jimmy Ward went down. Most likely he's going to be put on the short-term injured reserve. That's a big loss in the secondary for San Francisco. For starters, how big of a loss is his presence on the field? That would be my first question.
It's hard to describe because if you're not watching Jimmy Ward week in and week out, it's just kind of, you just go look at his stats and they're not like eye popping. I think he had his 2 interceptions last year were like his first interception since 2016. Yeah. But he's an elite tackler. Like I can't remember the last time I saw him whiff a tackle. Yep. He's so good in the open field that finding the right angle, he has good speed. He's super rangy. Like he can slide down in the slot and cover. In 2019, they had a game in LA against the Rams. And he just like locked up Cooper Kupp out of the slot. Yeah. And that was hard to do then. And harder to do now probably, but Kupp was still a really good player then. And Ward locked him down, especially late in the game. So losing Jimmy Ward just takes a chess piece off the board for them, who's not only really good in his free safety role, but also allows D'Amico Ryans to kind of do some fun stuff with moving him down in the box, moving him into the slot. And when you lose a player like that, the longest tenured defensive player like that hurts for sure, especially with he's out a minimum 4 games. They play in those 4 games. They play Justin Fields and the Bears. They play whoever the Seahawks are working with, but then it's Russell Wilson in week 3 and then Matthew Stafford in week 4. So not having your most experienced safety in the back end is I think going to sting a little bit.
Well, now to follow up on that, Kyle, there was a safety that had played a prominent role in San Francisco that signed in Philadelphia, now was cut in Philly. Does Jaquiski Tart make his way back to the Bay Area?
I talked to some people today, and it doesn't sound like that's going to be a thing. I'm not 100% certain that Tart wants to even come back. Okay. The Niners basically last year, the Niners didn't make like a huge effort to go sign him. And when they did, they signed him for like the minimum because it was late in the offseason and he wound up coming in and starting and again, just being Jaquiski Tart. Like he's a solid player. Is he a Pro Bowler? No, but he's just a quality starting caliber strong safety. If he's your backup strong safety, you feel great. But I don't get the idea that he's super thrilled with the 49ers and just how the last couple of years went for him in San Francisco. Right. So my guess is unless they throw like a bag at him, that is just like just money he's not going to go turn down.
Yeah.
I would imagine that he doesn't wind up back in San Francisco, even if it does make sense for the 49ers.
Mike, close it out.
Yeah, so Kyle, really going. We talked about both sides of the team, really, and what's one big area of the team really that's a concern for you about the 49ers in 2022?
Their offensive line stinks. Like,
I was putting
that nicely. Yeah.
No, so that's just that's exaggerating a little bit. It might stink, but so we don't know exactly because we haven't seen them all play together. Like their offensive line really struggled in the preseason finale in Houston, but there was no Trent Williams. Then Mike McGlinchey, their starting right tackle, didn't play in that one either. Yep. So without your two starting tackles, one of which is one of the three best players in football, that your line's going to struggle. And I think that had something to do with it, but also just it's Aaron Banks at left guard, who they drafted in the second round last year, who couldn't crack the starting line last year. He struggled a little bit in the preseason. Jake Brendel, their starting center, is super inexperienced. They have a fourth round rookie named Spencer Burford starting at right guard. And maybe in the regular season, these guys with game planning, they figure it out and they're fine. But right now it's a massive concern. Like it was a concern going into the offseason. They did minimal work to address it. They had Alex Mack retire late in the offseason, their former starting center. And they just looked like either they were banking too much on Aaron Banks being good, or they were banking on Alex Mack coming back, or both. But just what they've done to improve their offensive line has frankly not looked like it's been enough. And that is the biggest concern and the biggest question mark going into a year where they have a quarterback with Lance's lack of experience.
Yeah. So, I mean, final question for me, really building off of that, what's really your win-loss expectation where the San Francisco 49ers finish in 2022?
I think they should be as good as they were last year. I think 10-7 sounds about right. I believe that Trey Lance, maybe not out of the gate, but we saw him get better in two starts between week 5 and week 17 last year. I'm not putting any stock in preseason performances. Like it doesn't matter. It doesn't. So I expect him to improve a little bit, at least from where he was at week 17. I expect him to be improved in week 1 from that. And then I think he'll get better as the season goes on. They have a really tough stretch kind of through the middle of the season where they play like the Chiefs, and then they have the Chargers a couple weeks later, and like Tampa Bay is squeezed in there. And then they go on a short week to Seattle. It's like they have some really, really tough games. They have the Saints, and I think the Saints might be a sneaky good team this year. So they have some tough games for sure, but I think 10-7 with how good their defense is, their defense might wind up being one of the best in the league. So I think their defense is good enough. I believe in Trey Lance. I believe in Kyle Shanahan and being able to scheme up a run game, even if their offensive line struggles a little bit. This should be a pretty good team, even if they stumble at a couple points during the year.
Ooh, well, we'll definitely have to take a peek and see, because 10-7 is what you predicted last year. You were 100% right. August 23rd.
Oh, did I?
2000. Oh, yes.
Hey, go me. All right. Got one right.
If we had the time, I'd play that video. But, ladies and gentlemen, managing editor of the Niners Wire, of the USA Today SMG Group, and midday producer for 95.7 FM The Game, out in San Francisco, the Bay Area, Kyle Madson. Kyle, thank you so much, my friend. We love having you on here, and we hope to have you back on soon.
Yeah, let me know. Anytime.
Absolutely, man. All right. Well, next up, Arizona Cardinals. We'll be right back on the opposite side of this break on episode number 98.